Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and either got really, really hot or stayed cool, depending on which option you took. But it's been an incredible day so far. I can't believe we're getting close to the end, but we have so much great content left. And I'm particularly excited about this moment, this Heather Morgan lecture series. So before we start, I just want to take a moment to recognize Heather and sort of explain the history behind this fund and this lecture. So I think it was actually my second week. I'm relatively new at Waterfront Alliance, about 6 months in, and I think my second week I had the opportunity to meet with Jackie Snyder at AECOM, who's one of the members of the selection committee and actually really has galvanized this lecture series and the fund and the legacy behind it. And so she told me a lot about Heather, for whom this lecture series is named for. And the more I learned about her, the more deeply I was moved by the mark she left on this field and all the people who knew her. I believe many of you in this room did. She was clearly a remarkable force. She was intellectually rigorous, she was deeply passionate, and she was committed to helping communities understand and respond to climate risk. And she led some of the most important resilience projects in New York City, including the South Battery Park City Resilience Project, which feels obviously very appropriate for where we are in this space today. We're grateful to the advisory committee, the donors who made this possible, and especially to AECOM for helping to sustain this important legacy. For the 2026 Morgan Lecture, we are thrilled to have Dror Benshetrit. The founder of Studio Dror and Supernature Labs, Dror is a designer, thinker, inventor, and futurist whose ingenuity informs a striking range of unconventional work. Supernature Labs is a design and planning company that creates human communities designed for all life. It designs spaces and experiences that reconnect humans to nature, to one another, and to themselves through biomimicry, world-class creative leadership, and regenerative practices. And with that, please welcome Dror.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. Are you all still digesting? Yes. Great. It's a great time for me to put you to sleep. Let me just make sure my slides are on. I'm supposed to see the slides. All right. So for the next 20-something hours, 20-something minutes. Buckminster Fuller actually used to give a 20-hour lecture, but I'll make it 25 minutes. I want to talk about one challenge. One particular challenge that I've been focusing on for the last 9 years, pretty much exclusively, which have to do with the fact that we are simply not giving enough space for life in our environment. You see, there's one major design problem that we are missing. The largest design challenge of our time is the expansion of urbanism over the next 25, 35 years. We are about to double the land coverage of cities. So when we talk about urban growth, we have to understand that there are two completely separate challenges. Existing cities, how we're going to deal with our existing problems within existing cities, and the future expansion of cities into land that is currently farmland, forest land, desert land, and what we call the green field. So doubling the land coverage of cities is not the same problem as dealing with the existing ones. One of the most important things in every discipline is understanding the root cause of a problem. The very first decisions that we are making in cities have so much influence that it's hard for us to comprehend, because we often do not understand that the root cause of most of our urban problem lies in land subdivision. What does that mean, land subdivision? From the state level to the municipal level to the private plot, we have been dividing land with a very simple tool, a ruler and a pencil. Why? Because those were the tools that were available to us up until pretty much 35 years ago, in which we've started to introduce computers. And today, we are far, far, far away from that. So, for the first time in human history, we are able to shift our logic from linear land subdivision and linear decisions in design into what we call the geometry of life. My name is Dror. I've been based in New York City over the last 25 years. I started Supernature Labs after having my design practice in New York about 9 years ago. And then the Bioplanning Institute was established about 2 years ago. And I'm from here. This grid that is so familiar to us is not so different from many other places. This has been the way that we divide land for many, 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 many years. And the challenge is that we simply forgot. We forgot that we are part of nature and we need nature in a close proximity. So when we look at those lines and we look at those street subdivision, we start to understand that the typology of what we build depend on those lines. If I own a piece of property that is 100 feet by 75 feet and I get a permit to build a 20-story, I'm going to have a refrigerator, okay? I'm going to have a box. It doesn't matter how talented of an architect I'm going to find. It's going to be a mid-rise or a high-rise or a skyscraper or a low-rise or a private home, depending on the density in which we're able to design. So different culture, different climate, very similar geometry. So we often like to say that we shape the environment, and in return, the environment shapes us. Do we truly believe that we want to be shaped by an environment that looks like that? So if we are doubling the land coverage of cities and doubling the total volumetric mass of urbanism over the next 25 to 35 years, should we build more mid-rises and high-rises and skyscrapers? We simply lost connection with the natural world. We lost a sense of empathy in cities. We lost a sense of belonging in cities. And we lost a sense of community in cities. The #1 urban pandemic in the world right now is the pandemic of loneliness. And it's not just about the measurements of how many people committed suicide this year. There's so much in between that means loneliness to a lot of people. But loneliness is not the only problem. So when we say we can actually create environments that provide more space for life, what are we talking about? If we are truly going to double the land coverage of cities, can we help make sure that all of those places do not repeat the same mistakes that we've done for years after years? And that is our responsibilities. Our responsibilities, I mean us designers, architects, urban planners, municipalities, mayors, and other people that have influence on their own places and other places around the world. We live in a time that we can share ideas, we can explore different directions with very simple tools and now very simple prompts. So, can we prevent that the built environment does not continue to look like a graveyard from a plane and actually look like how nature likes to build? There is a reason when we look under the telescope and under the microscope and anywhere in between, we realize that nature has a certain geometrical logic that repeats itself. In various industries, we call it node-based logic. In other industry, we call it circular packing, Voronoi patterns, and other names, cellular aggregation. Cellular aggregation fundamentally is a node-based logic and not a linear logic. The way we've been dividing spaces has always been linear. So, instead of showing those opportunities as challenges, I'm looking at them from the point of view of, can we increase happiness in cities? Can we increase safety in cities, optimize traffic flow, enhance a sense of community, increase walkability, improve air quality, greater nature and biodiversity, elevate real estate value, increase community safety, and enhance climate resilience. Those are just the top 10 points. But the ripple effect of those types of improvements are massive. And we can resolve them not in a band-aid solution for independent issues, but actually holistically. How? Simply change the geometry. So, one of my favorite sentences, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Can we stop for a moment and can we try something else? Actually, all of you, architects and urban planners, knows that today we can simulate anything, right? We don't need to build and hope that it will not collapse, right? We know how to engineer. We know how to simulate. We know how to measure so many different things. Are we going to create new problems? Absolutely yes. Is it worth it? Absolutely yes. So let's test it and compare it. Today, you're all using AI tools, you're dropping in information, you're asking a question, and you're able to get so much information by creating comparables, right? So today, to create comparable feasibility studies, it's simply a few clicks. Simply a few clicks. So maybe we're able to shift from what we call sustainable practices to what we should really be doing is push for ecological harmony. Why? Because 20 years ago, we started to realize that we need to be human-centric design. What the hell is human-centric design? Weren't we always human-centric design? No, the truth is we've been car-centric design, profit-centric design. Today, we realize that we need to be life-centric design. It is our responsibility to design for the quality of the soil, for the quality of the trees, for the quality of the birds. That should be our responsibility, to design for all of life as one practical objective, not just for the quality of people, because the quality of people gets enhanced when you're actually thinking about the quality of nature. So what can we do with a simple geometry? We are looking at all those images that shows us, oh, nature repeats itself in various scales. There's certain logic to this geometry, if we simply understand that we can design like nature does, finally, we can design with nature, and we can design for all of life, those three principles together helping us to understand that we're actually designing for our relationship between us and the land that we're in, us and each other, and us and as ourselves. So a very naive experiment that happened 8 years ago, we basically said, what will happen if we are actually looking at the same density in the same land, but shifting the geometry from linear to cellular? We realized that because of the geometry alone, we can reduce road and road infrastructure pretty significantly. And by doing that, we can increase the amount of natural area significantly. Now comes all of the questions. Now comes, but wait a second, where are the straight lines? Wouldn't it take so much more time to get from point A to point B? My goal over the next 5 minutes is to show you that actually all of those concerns that you have about what you think is the most efficient is going to be wrong. Because the world is not a container. And inside of a container, it's easier to pack boxes. Yes. The best way to fill up a container is with 90 degrees boxes. But the way to stock ourselves is not. And the proof for that is very simple. 4.5 billion years of evolution doesn't build in boxes. 4.5 billion years of evolution builds in cellular aggregation. Why? Because it's more efficient across every aspect. So let's look at the same exact diagram. Instead of 2D, in 3D. Take the same exact components that the city of New York have and just reshuffle the geometry of those pixels in this case. And just by rearranging them, look how much green space you can have in the middle of each one of those communities. Look how much road and road infrastructure you can reduce. Yes, still with sidewalk that can be zigzagged like that. That seems inefficient. And yes, traffic is actually flowing from point A to point B faster, smoother, and safer. Why? Because I have no four ways intersection anymore. Okay, so look at the amount of conflict point in a regular grid logic and the amount of a conflict point in a cellular logic. It's simply because a four-way intersection have 16 potential collision points. And a three-way intersection have only 3 collision points, which means I can pass through traffic smoother and safer. In some incidents, I can reduce traffic signals and other equipment, and I get to work a lot more relaxed, or back home a lot more relaxed, because every intersection is a conflict point. Every intersection, if I do not stop, if I do not pay attention, I'm risking my life. For the very first time, we can separate pedestrian flow and vehicular circulation. For the first time, we are not in the sidewalk because the car is in the middle. For the first time, we can actually flow through the cities in green spaces without ever interfering with traffic. How does that affect my 10-year-old that is going to play with his friend? And I'm worried about the streets that he needs to cross. What happens when he can go and play downstairs without crossing any road? So simply having internal spaces, very simple European underpasses for just pedestrian, and you can go for runs in the cities for miles and never interact with traffic. So instead of what we call the super block, we call it the supercell. It can come in various densities, in various scales, in various ways. The geometry of the construction can, of course, be rectilinear. It doesn't mean that, now we're shifting the geometry of construction or anything else. And let me show it to you in 3 different densities. What you're familiar with as suburban sprawl, right? Suburban density. The same exact homes on the left, the same amount, the same sizes, the same lawns is on the right. But think about the experience of the kids that are playing in the parking lot versus the kids that are playing in the gardens. A sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of gathering, right? What do we love about cities so much? The serendipity of cities, right? The fact that every day can look different because I bump into somebody in the coffee shop. We can design for those intersections, for those interactions, for those serendipitous moments. We can design for them when we have a node-based logic that basically people can meet and interact in those places. So low density, mid density, high density, exactly the same logic. Massive reduction in road and road infrastructure, maintaining the density, because there's no developer in this room that will ever allow me to reduce density. And of course, a massive increase in natural area. Now is the big surprise. It is actually more cost-effective and faster to build. Why? Everybody here in this room that understands construction logic, no matter what system, what technology, understands that the biggest time spent is logistics. What is logistics? The times that it takes for the trucks to leave the site so another truck can come in and deploy whatever it is that it deploys, right? So think about it like cooking. Same exact logic. If you are in a round kitchen where the stove and the fridge and the sink are all in arm reach, you are cooking faster, right? Instead of walking to the fridge, coming back, walking to the stove in a long, linear, elegant, you basically have central deployment. Central deployment reduces construction time significantly. Reduction in road and road infrastructure is another big saving and another time saving. Massive reduction in water retention, massive increase in water retention, of course, the ability to have more porous space, a lot quieter environment that basically is not just masked by the trees with them invites the birds and the crickets that masks the sound. And this one is my favorite. Globally, we spend 40% of our energy on cooling and heating. That's a global number. With a simple shift in geometrical massing, with a basic orientation to an average sun path, we can actually reduce heating and cooling very significantly, about 40%. So that's the logic of bioplanning. In just a few minutes, we published our first book a few months ago. It's yet to be in the market, hopefully very soon. We brought in some of the best subject matter experts to support us in writing this approach and understanding the various aspects, because urban planning is a holistic discipline that requires a lot of areas of expertise. And then we started experimenting with that on various sites, on various continents, in various cultures. Some of those projects are adjacent to existing cities. Some of those are independent communities. And then we realize we have to do two things simultaneously. inspire a world to look different at the future that we need to build. There is about 60,000 municipalities worldwide that are going to double their land coverage over the next 25 years. I don't know how big your practice is. It cannot handle 60,000 municipalities. How do we influence 60,000 municipalities? We hopefully inspire them to do different. Through inspirations or projects that we build. So Supernature Labs have converted from being a research R&D entity to basically the first global real estate brand for ecological development. What does that mean? We've picked a few places around the world, specific places that have massive urban growth, so developing countries, India, Latin America, the Middle East, and we basically restructure our organization in such a way that we are developing those flagship projects as inspiration. We have our own fund and AUM structure to support financially the growth of those places. We're not the developers ourselves, we're master developers. And each one of those development projects are going to be various examples of how greenfield can evolve into an ecological development. We have a couple projects in Costa Rica. We have a project in the Bahamas, a couple projects in Brazil, Panama, India, which, by the way, India alone have a massive amount of urban growth, bigger than any other country in the world today. Africa is evolving from 1.4 billion people into 2.6 billion people by 2050. So you ask yourself, where another 1.2 billion people are going to live. I'm going to show you a very short, it comes after this. So one of those projects that is a little bit more advanced is the Supernature Abu Dhabi. There is going to be a whole district of Abu Dhabi that is set with this logic. In this particular case, of course, is very hospitality heavy, because that's what Abu Dhabi is. But again, an example for how places like this can evolve. All right. So why did we choose to go the real estate path? I haven't shared with you a bit of my history. I'm not an architect by training. I'm not an urban planner by training. I work with a lot of architects, a lot of urban planners, and I've always been an inventor. When I moved to New York in 2001, I realized something. All of my talented friends are trying to be best in the world at one particular thing. They try to specialize in one particular area. And I thought to myself, creativity does not work like that. Creativity have no boundaries. Disciplines outside of academia have no boundaries. And in 2006, somebody came and said, Dror, have you thought to venture into architecture? And I said, yes, but I'm intimidated. I haven't gone to architectural school. I don't have a degree. I know that I can come up with some interesting ideas, and I know how to co-create teams. And the very first architectural commission that we got was an island in Abu Dhabi. Very short after, that was in September of '07, the development arm of the Crown Sheikh of Abu Dhabi invited us to think of this project. And when we sent the presentation, we got a phone call back saying, the Crown Sheikh of Abu Dhabi wants to build your project. I wasn't so silent. I started laughing hysterically. And when I relaxed, I basically told them, guys, I have a confession to make. I have no idea how to build this. They answered with the smartest thing I've heard. They said, we know. We've done our homework on the size of your team, and we know that we need to pad you with the knowledge that you're lacking, because we want to build this vision. 6 months later, we opened a sales office on the island, and within 72 hours, the developer sold $976 million worth of sale from a project that was supposed to be $154 million total sale. So we broke the record of the most expensive residential ever sold in the UAE at the time per square footage, and the fastest pre-sale in the history of the UAE, and a little bit better than Avatar on its first weekend out. And then I realized that that logic, when you create something that is different, there are markets for it that will adapt it early on, because there are markets for early adapters. And markets for early adapters exist everywhere. This is exactly the reason why Tesla chose to come first with a sports car, and only later with a mass market production. That has been the logic in the design world for many, many years. You start with where you can introduce a direction with people that are willing to be early adapters, and then you can move forward. The problem is that some issues are too fast. By the time those communities are going to be built as demonstration, we are going to lose an enormous amount of urban growth. Why? Not because those roads are already going to be paved, not because those places are going to already be built, because if the root cause of the problem is land subdivision, and once the land gets divided and I can no longer change that geometry, it's over. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here today because this morning I'm not focusing on those projects. I'm focusing on talking to you. I'm focusing on sharing with you the urgency that land subdivisions are actually hurting us so much in the long term, because we are locked to a certain typologies we cannot shift from. So the Bioplanning Institute realized that it has a different mission than Supernature Labs. The Bioplanning Institute needs to build a standard. Standard? What kind of standard? What for? Out of 150 different standards that exist today, LEED, as you know, is one of the most successful one. All of them are talking about sustainable development. None of them addresses ecological needs and ecological practices. None of them addresses urban planning and the way we subdivide land and the way that we organize ourselves on a plan before the communities gets built. So what we realize is that the standard is not for the sake of the standard. The standard is actually for something else. Compliances. That I learned from a very wise man at Goldman Sachs that invited me to a meeting about a year ago and said, Dror, there is an issue. I like what you guys are doing. I believe that it can be the future of urban growth, but there is an issue. We at Goldman Sachs, as well as any of our competitors, do not have financial products for ecological urban growth. So developers are not incentivized to build like this versus like that. Do you know why we don't have financial products for ecological development? I said, no, I have no idea how you guys build financial products. I've never built a financial product before. And he said it's very simple. Every financial product needs to have compliances. We cannot invent our own compliances. We have to rely on something else, a third party. A standard will be great. If you guys can build a standard, we can build compliances. And then he went silent for a couple of very long minutes. And then he turned around and he goes, I don't think you understand the scale of what I'm talking about. There is about $300 to $350 trillion that are going to get deployed over the next 25 years for urban growth. If Goldman Sachs can do 1% of that over the next 25 years, we change the bank. If Goldman Sachs is going to do that, and other financial institutions are going to do that, we can actually make a better world. So what does it take? A standard? Compliances? New financial bond and other financial products? So we called it LIFE. And LIFE stands for Living Infrastructure for Future Ecologies.
Geometric bioplanning, taking a circular collective connective approach, lets us explore innovative transactions, lets us explore incentive-based revenue models and integrated solutions, finding the benefits and the savings across this. Why integrated ecosystems? Cellular clusters, shortens networks, improves connectivity, improves transactions with others, cuts roads, cuts transmission, cuts broadband, cuts waste, cuts energy consumption. Most importantly, it cuts and saves time.
That was John from Goldman, and this is Jaime from AECOM.
At AECOM, we're driven by working to deliver a better world. And we can only do that when we can actually measure performance. We are thrilled to be collaborating with Dror and LIFE to actually measure the potential that bioplanning and ecological cities have to deliver green-blue corridors that can manage floods and climate risks more effectively, that can create more shade and improve airflows and manage outdoor heat stress, that can improve travel times, that can use mixed-use densities to create more livable and adaptable cities.
All right. So what am I asking for? A responsibility, a care, an integrity to what we do. That's all I'm asking for. We understand that the responsibility of the future, of the built environment, is in our hands for the benefits of our children's and their children's. So how can you all participate? That is a question I'll leave with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dror. This is always an amazing opportunity and part of the Waterfront Alliance Conference, the Morgan Lecture, where we really get to highlight and hear from someone who's pushing boundaries and making creative opportunities. You highlight and call attention to some important concepts I think that we all need to take into account. That creativity we need for climate adaptation knows no boundaries, and as you said, defies specialization, and that change requires us to think boldly and creatively about the very foundation of how we build and develop. I think I was reflecting while you were talking on some of how your work reflects some of the themes we've talked about today, and I think two things very important to the work of resilience and climate adaptation, but also planning and designing on the waterfront that we've heard today that I think is reiterated in your work, is we need to focus on performance outcomes, right? Not what infrastructure do we build, but how do we define quality of life, and what built environment do we want to make for ourselves? I charge everyone to do that. And then I want to reiterate something that Raju highlighted in his opening remarks that I think you exemplify really well, is we need to create the opportunity to reawaken imagination, right? Your call to think big about the ways we shape the environment and the environment shape us is an important thing for everyone to take away today and to bring back to your work. One of the things that inspires me and gives me hope about our ability to do that every year when I come to this conference and in my role on the Waterfront Alliance board is this interdisciplinary interaction. The work that this very conference and the Waterfront as an alliance, as an organization represents. Please don't let the connections and the ideas and inspirations you hear today end today. I charge each of you to follow up with a new contact, an old connection, a panel topic, a lecture inspiration that you've heard, and follow up, take action. Finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the work of another individual whose work exemplifies these themes and performative design and interdisciplinary thinking. Many of you were here last year and had the amazing and unique opportunity to hear Kanjan Yu speak about his work and sponge cities. And last year's Morgan Lecture, Kanjan, he was an award-winning practitioner in my own chosen field of landscape architecture. He bridged interdisciplinary boundaries and envisioned, but also built performative landscapes that gave us the idea and reality of sponge cities. Tragically, not long after we had the opportunity to hear his lecture and inspiration, we lost Kanjan. And I just hope that everyone takes a moment to reflect on that work and what he brings to the disciplines of climate adaptation, resilience, landscape architecture, city design, waterfront design. His ideas and work live on and inspire. And as your work, Dror, does, I just want to take this moment to honor Kanjun, but also to highlight the importance of taking time for us all in a lecture like this, and the power and importance of inspiration in planning and designing resilient cities and waterfronts. So thank you for your lecture today. And go enjoy a brief refreshment and the remaining panels of the day. So thank you.